Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. There's this very sad and devastating news in the Pakistan media that earlier in the day, 5 churches have been vandalized and partially burned also by the Muslim mob. This has happened in a city called Faisalabad and an area near that called Jaranwala. It is very sad, and reportedly Muslim clerics made announcements in the mosques which incited the Muslim mob to take this action against the church, because reportedly some Christians violated the Holy Qur'an. More often than not, they are falsely accused. I want to make certain things very, very clear from the book of God, which is the Quran, which the Muslims supposedly follow and are supposed to act upon it. First and foremost, God Almighty and His Messenger, the Holy Prophet ﷺ, is very clear when they say that you cannot under any circumstances take the law in your own hands. Whatever is the outcome of the situation, you cannot take law in your own hands. We have to report it to the higher authorities. Higher authorities means to the police or to the to those people who look after the law and order situation of the country. I want to read out a passage from the Quran where God is crystal clear that whoever takes the law in his or her hands, spreads mischief in the land of God Almighty, should be hanged and crucified and their hands and feet cut from opposite ends. Let me narrate the Quran, chapter 5, verse 33, where God says, they should be told that the punishment of those who wage war against God and His Messenger and in this way strive to spread anarchy in the land is to execute them in an exemplary way, or to crucify them, or to amputate their hands and feet from opposite sides, or to banish them from their land. Such is the disgrace in this world, and in the hereafter for them shall be an awful doom. So all those who took the law in their own hands, whether they were actually doing so or they were just standing there and making videos or taking photographs, all of them who were there at that moment of time when the churches were being vandalized come under the ambit of this particular verse that where God says you have a hand in spreading mischief on God's earth. The Holy Prophet ﷺ also has asked us that during war times, when there is war, not to harm the non-combatants, not to harm the buildings, the trees, the animals, crops, fruit trees, and not to demolish any structure. And if there is a person who takes refuge in his or her own religious building, for instance, in a church, in a synagogue, in a temple, or in a mosque for that matter, that person is not to be harmed. And the Holy Prophet has said, even during the war times, if the non-combatants want to leave that place, the non-combatants do not narrow the path of those people. This is where the Holy Prophet is coming to us from. And what are we doing? We are acting actually diametrically opposite to the humane, nature-based teachings of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. This is the real blasphemy. This is actually the blasphemy. I want to say this. Burning or violating the Holy Quran is not the blasphemy which God has portrayed. It is this blasphemy which, when you do not listen to the teachings and the words of the Holy Prophet ﷺ or God Almighty in the Quran or through the sayings of Holy Prophet. This is the real blasphemy. And the Muslim cleric who is responsible for inciting the mob and being responsible for burning down or vandalizing 5 churches should be hanged publicly. This is what the Quran states. I've just read that verse, that they should be hanged or crucified on their hands or feet, amputated from opposite ends. Because he incited the mob in taking the law in their own hands. He's a cleric. He's supposed to propagate restraint, tolerance, and make them follow the word of God Almighty. But he did the opposite. He is more responsible than the mob. He should be hanged publicly. Let me tell you another thing here. 99.99% of clerics, of Muslim clerics, principally stand with what has happened with the churches, what people have done. Because they are the ones who enacted the blasphemy law in Pakistan. And it is the exact implementation of this law that is taking place. That there is a group of people who allegedly report that someone has violated the Holy Quran or the Holy Prophet, and the mob gathers, they burn that person or they kill that person, take the law in their own hands. It is all because the clerics in their minds are with that mob mentality. This is the reason. Quran is very clear. God is very clear in another part of the Quran. I want to read that out and just see how it fits in with what the mob have done, or the cleric who was responsible for inciting. God says in chapter 4, verse 140, He has revealed in this very book the instruction that wherever you hear that God's revelations are being ridiculed or rejected, do not sit there with those who ridicule them until they get engaged in some other talk. Otherwise, you too will become like them. Absolutely crystal clear that wherever people take law in their own hands, they start accusing someone, they start vandalizing the temples or the synagogues or the church or the mosques of other sects. If you stand there, if you witness that, God says, I shall consider you from amongst them who are actually participating in that vandalizing. But we do not want to follow the Quran. And people come up with different types of sayings of Holy Prophet which do not conform with what the Quran says. And they propagate those teachings of the Holy Prophet. Let me say here, Holy Prophet ﷺ, whenever he says something or he says something, can never ever contradict the Quran, can never ever contradict God Almighty. It has to be in sync, in line, aligned with God's verdict, God's aspirations, God's instructions and His teachings. Quran is very clear. All those who are there in vandalizing the mosque, including the cleric and all those even here sitting, sitting beyond those cities who are condoning or who are agreeing with this act, all of them are responsible, shall be judged in the hereafter by God Almighty. The real, actual way of life, which is called uswa hasana in Arabic, a word expression also used in Urdu. Uswa hasana means the lifestyle of Holy Prophet. Does not the lifestyle of Holy Prophet stands contrary to such acts of violence, especially against the non-Muslims. It takes a very, very harsh stand and outlook towards such acts. It is time now that the voice of the civil society, the voice of the people who present from the Quran, that has to come forward, and all such acts of vandalism and all such laws that have been enacted have to go to the backbench. It is high time. Thank you very much. God bless all those Christians who were affected by these acts of vandalism. God knows what a stringent and strict view he has taken of this action. If only we could understand, if only we the Muslims could read the Quran and see how God looks at it. Assalamu alaikum.